show stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for that wonderful welcome. You know, it's an honor to be among a group of America-loving patriots like all of you. You have guts and you've got conviction. You know, it's inspiring to look out on a crowd like this. When I was walking around the hall earlier today, I saw families, I saw parents and grandparents, young women, professionals, teenagers, hunters and sportsmen, members of law enforcement. NRA members come from every single walk of life, every race, every creed. And I am proud to be a lifetime NRA member and to stand with all of you. Listen, America is struggling right now, and there are those who want to change our foundational way of life. And then there are those of us who value the gift that we were given by the founders of this great republic. The test of time has proven that this greatest experiment in human history, called the United States of America, is truly the only government that guarantees an individual's liberties and freedoms. Now, our hearts are broken at the tragedy that we saw this week here in Texas. And as a mother and a grandmother, I can't even imagine what the families of those dear children and those teachers are going through. I hope that you are all lifting them up in prayer. And sadly, it's not the first time that we've experienced this type of grief. I think all of us here today and across the country never want to see anything like this ever happen again. But we have very many difficult questions that we have to answer today. This isn't the time for grandstanding. It's not the time for shouting or division. This is the time to be honest, to work together to protect the future for our children and our grandchildren. To truly decide where we are going as a country, we need to reflect on our history and look back at where we've been. Here are some of those questions. Why was the Second Amendment even created? Does it still hold value today? Why is it okay for some to have guns and others not? Why do we protect our banks, our stores, and celebrities with armed guards, but not our children? Are they not truly our greatest treasure? Much, much more valuable than material things? If we limit the average citizen from having a firearm, will that keep those who choose to ignore the law from accessing one as well? Listen, I don't have all the answers for you today, but I do want to share with you why I believe the Second Amendment may be the most important of our Bill of Rights. Now, the Second Amendment is sacred to me and to our family. It always has been. And able to understand why it's so important to us, you need to know a little bit about me personally. Growing up on a farm in South Dakota, guns were just a fact of life for my family. My dad was a farmer and a rancher, a real-life cowboy who worked harder than anybody I had ever known. He was tough as rawhide. He lived a life of integrity, and he expected his children to embrace those ideals. Of course, this also applied to our firearms. Owning guns wasn't a political thing for us. Like most American families, we rarely discussed government or politics around the table. On our ranch, our politics were lived, not talked about. We knew we had freedom and we had personal responsibility, but we also knew that we needed to use both to make our corner of the world a better place to serve other people. It wasn't complicated. Before I was old enough to get my own hunting license, I used to follow my grandmother when she was out bird hunting. And yes, in South Dakota, even our grandmas are armed. Now, my dad, he preferred big game hunting. And from a young age, my siblings and I, we went with him. We had guns hanging in the back window of every pickup. Our gun cabinet was proudly displayed in our living room. Firearms were woven into the fabric of our day. We grew up educated about guns and hunting. And as much as I love hunting, the Second Amendment isn't about any of that. The Second Amendment is about deterrence. It's about ensuring government respects the rights and the liberty of citizens. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Those 27 words are freedom's last line of defense. The founders understood deeply that without an armed citizenry, authentic freedom could not and would not survive. Now, how did they know this? What were their circumstances? What did they know about human nature and the temptation to seize power? Did they know how fragile freedom could be? What were they drawing on? Well, number one, they were drawing on their own experience. The founders knew that the country would have never survived the Revolutionary War if the colonists hadn't owned their own weapons. Look at Boston in 1775. 11,000 expertly trained British soldiers occupied the city, and George Washington's ragtag army of Continentals surrounded them. His American volunteers carried only their personal muskets. They used these to hold the British at bay until a 25-year-old bookseller named Henry Knox could retrieve 60 tons of artillery and move it more than 300 miles to help. In the meantime, the Continentals challenged the infantry of the British Empire with the same firearms that they used to hunt squirrels and deer and to feed their families. Now, what else did the founding generation understand? They knew human nature. Writing in 1775, Thomas Paine laid it out clearly. While avarice and ambition have a place in the heart of man, the weak will become prey to the strong. The history of every age and nation establishes these truths, and facts need but little arguments when they prove themselves. When I read about the Constitution, I'm often struck by the subject and the issue of timing. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, were ratified effective December 15th, 1791. But what else was happening in the world at that time? The French Revolution. Unlike the US Constitution, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, the foundational document of the French Revolution, does not include a right to bear arms. And Thomas Paine's arguments proved themselves in horrifying detail. In Paris, which was the center of European learning and culture for 1,000 years, mobs tore down statues and crosses. Does that sound familiar? They attacked religion. They desecrated churches. The mob consumed French society until a dictator could arise from all the chaos. Our founding fathers were watching these horrors take place elsewhere in the world. One Pennsylvania delegate to the Constitutional Convention wrote the following to the Philadelphia Federal Gazette in 1789. He wrote, "Civil rulers may attempt to tyrannize, and the military forces which must be occasionally raised to defend our country might pervert their power to the injury of their fellow citizens." Does this mean that at the time the Constitution was ratified, the founders might have been worried about a corrupt American government using the military to crush the rights of regular citizens? It sure sounds that way, doesn't it? So let's talk about the cities with the most restrictive gun control laws. When 30 people are shot over a weekend in Chicago, we get nothing but silence from Joe Biden and the media. When gang members kill innocent children in Baltimore or Cleveland, they might give it a passing mention on the local news. But when a deranged, mentally unstable murderer who fits the left's political narrative kills innocent children and people, the media seizes the opportunity to paint millions of law-abiding gun owners and you and me as barbarians, monsters. People like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi instantly start calling for more gun laws that wouldn't have made any difference in stopping the shooter. They use the tragic situation to push their agenda, and it is all about control, and it is garbage. I'm not buying it for a second, and you shouldn't either. George Mason warned, to disarm the people is the most effectual way to enslave them. The pandemic showed us that freedom is just as fragile in our time as it was in 1775. Now, fortunately, more Americans are waking up to this. From 2020 to 2021, around 11 million people in this country purchased a firearm for the very first time. About half of them were women. And almost 60% of them were over the age of 45. I believe the number one reason was because of fear of civil unrest and to protect themselves and their families. We have seen the same type of radical mob mentality taking place on the streets of American cities that swept Paris in the 1790s. Woke mobs are tearing down statues, and it doesn't matter who they are of. Our founding fathers, Catholic missionaries, they even wanted to come after Mount Rushmore. Well, not on my watch. On cue, the left and their media allies cheered them on. Remember when Chris Cuomo was asking where in the Constitution it says protests have to be peaceful? Well, it's in the first sentence in the First Amendment, Chris. Look it up. Of course. Now, Americans were horrified. We have an incredible opportunity in front of us, but we also have a challenge. We need to find, educate, and persuade these Americans of why the Second Amendment is so vitally important. I mentioned that I grew up surrounded by guns on a farm and a ranch, but it was only later that I learned firearms have an essential role in sustaining our political freedom here at home. And we need to help others understand that role too. We need to be smart in how we reach out to them. We should anchor ourselves in history and our present day trials. Just saying, oh, the founders said this, so we should do it too, is just not good enough. They need to know why. The enemies of freedom have always tried to disarm patriots, which is why we have to engage today. We know this isn't something new in human history. And because of that, we can anticipate the challenges. We need to act with confidence and with courage. We need to take action. Now, the very first bill that I signed upon taking office as governor in 2018 was constitutional carry. Not only did I sign the bill, I held a signing ceremony in the rotunda of the Capitol to demonstrate the importance of the legislation. But I wasn't done. So this year, I advocated for and signed legislation that repeals all concealed carry permit fees in South Dakota. And the state is even going to pay for your federal background check. It will not cost you a penny to exercise your Second Amendment constitutional rights in South Dakota. We also clarified South Dakota's Stand Your Ground law by establishing that the burden of proof by clear and convincing evidence lies on the parties seeking to overcome the immunity provided under this law. You have a right in South Dakota to protect yourself and your family. We updated the definition of loaded firearm to designate that a firearm is considered loaded only if a round is chambered. This makes it easier to store unloaded firearms while still letting you defend yourself in situations when seconds matter. When it comes to the Second Amendment, South Dakota is leading, and other states should follow our lead. Now is not the time to cave to the woke culture. Let me tell you the truth about the enemies of the Second Amendment. They are schooled in the ways of Marx and Lenin. They play the long game. They are content with chipping away at your rights. 50 years, 100 years, they are deceptive and they are patient. They count on Americans to tire of the fight, to eventually relinquish our freedoms and our rights. We saw it during the pandemic. Too many of our fellow citizens freely handed over their rights to work or to even leave their home until a corrupt government gave them the green light to do so. Well, not in South Dakota. We were the only state that never once shut down a single business or closed churches. Our children came through the pandemic with the least amount of learning loss of any in the country, and we are leading the country in educational outcomes. We gave our citizens We gave our citizens the best information. We let them use personal responsibility to make the best decisions for themselves and for their families. You know, freedom. I clearly told the people of South Dakota what I was doing to solve the problem. My friends could see it, and so could my opponents. And that's what this community must do now. We need to be very clear about what the Second Amendment is really about and why we advocate for it. This position is not going to make you popular with the liberals who want to restrict your freedom.
Who gives a shit?
They will attack you. We see it every single day. I get attacked every day in the media. I have two things to say about that. First, you get the most flack when you're over the target.
Yes.
If they're attacking you, it's because you're doing something effective that scares them. So keep it up.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. She's so awesome.
Second, stay tough. To paraphrase Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, you can't go wobbly on this. All right? I was recently reading a history of General Grant. He had a powerful reflection from early in the Civil War that I think is relevant for us in the gun rights community. In one of his earliest battles, the young Colonel Grant was leading his regiment against an enemy position. He was suddenly aware and felt an all-consuming fear. Fear that he would fail. Fear that he was going to get killed. Fear that he was going to get all of his men killed. And when his men finally came up over the rise, they saw that the Confederate position was empty, that they had deserted. The opposing colonel had been every bit as afraid of Grant as Grant had been of him. He didn't have the stomach for the battle, so he had turned tail and he had ran. Here's what Grant wrote of that event. From that event to the close of the war, I never once experienced trepidation upon confronting an enemy again. Though I always felt more or less anxiety, I never forgot that he had as much reason to fear my forces as I had of his. The left likes to appear monolithic, unstoppable, but it's not. And what's more, the left is afraid of the NRA. They fear people who think for themselves and who defend their rights. There are so many people out there that are counting on us to help them defend their right. So don't back down. Now is not the time to quit. Now would be the worst time to quit.
Yes.
Now is when we double down.
Yes. Hear, hear. But, she's awesome.
Lastly, what does it look like when a person embraces their fundamental rights and responsibilities? I think it's clear that they become more free. They become more capable, more independent, more powerful. more free. We are all called to live courageously in the battlefield of our daily lives. Our workplaces, our communities, our homes, our country needs it. No weak-willed or half measures will save us from the relentless and the unhinged radicals that we are facing today. So we double down. This fight is much bigger than the people in this room. The consequences of our actions will affect all future generations of Americans. Do you want your children to have the same freedom that we've been blessed with? Do you want your grandchildren to understand and to know and experience liberty? Then we must protect the Second Amendment. It is an honor. It is an honor to be in the trenches with each of you. And that's why I'm proud to be here today. So thank you for your work. God bless you. And may God continue to bless the great United States of America. Thank you.
All right. She's amazing. I had to play that because she is amazing. She's an awesome woman, awesome patriot, real, genuine, and straight shooter. She's inspiring. And she's absolutely correct. We are in the midst of a communist takeover. And I'm not saying that, I'm not exaggerating. It's not hyperbole. It's 100%. We are under a communist takeover in this country, in their country, just south of us, and throughout the Western world. We are under a communist takeover. There's no question about it. Yes, in Canada, we have weak constitution. We have a weak Charter of Rights and Freedoms that doesn't give us anything remotely close to the Second Amendment. But I don't give a shit. My advice, based on what I'm hearing coming from the Liberals, coming from Trudeau's mouth, is they're coming after more of our guns. Somebody mentioned here a little bit earlier, we've all had fishing accidents. Yes, we have. And I guess the ones they know I have, maybe we lost in a fishing accident. It is what it is. Under no circumstances do you ever give up your guns. Don't do it. Whatever it is you need to do it. Don't ever give up your guns. We've seen too many countries go down that road, and we can't do it. We can't do it. Freedom and liberty are the consequence. And those things are under attack. They need to destroy our freedoms. They need to destroy our liberty. They need to destroy everything that we cherish in order for them to achieve their goals. And we have to stand in their way. Do whatever it is you have to do. It is what it is. And, consequences be damned. It's getting pretty serious in this country. And I'm not prepared to let it go. I'm not prepared to give up. I'll never give up. Somebody mentioned here earlier that, boo-hoo, we're in Canada and our politicians suck. Yeah, well, they do. But they only suck because we've allowed them to suck. So now it's time for us, all of us, to re-engage politically. It's time for us to hold our politicians accountable. It's time for us to gather on the steps of the legislatures, to gather on the steps of Parliament, and demand accountability and demand responsibility. I'm not talking about 100 of us. I'm not talking about 1,000 of us. I'm talking about millions of us have to get off our ass and hold our politicians accountable, because we've allowed them to take us to the brink of destruction. We've allowed them. We've done this. This is our fault. We've been fat and lazy for far too long. And now we're going to bitch and whine because it's too hard? Because it's just too hard to fight back? It's too hard to hold these people accountable? We have the power. We have to come together. We have to unite en masse without fear. And we have to do it soon. And I'm not calling for a violent initiation of revolution. I'm not calling for that. I'm calling for the masses to come together and unite in defense of the values that we all claim to cherish. It is up to us. There's nothing that pisses me off more than people that, do the Eeyore routine. And my response to them is always, then go lay down and lick your nuts like a good house dog and let all do the hard work. Because there's so many people that seem like they don't want to do the work. That it's too hard. They want the silver bullet. They want the quick fix. There isn't one. Christopher James is full of shit. Christopher James is a snake oil salesman. Dallas Hills is a snake oil salesman. There is no quick fix. Marcus Ray, there's no quick fix. There's no silver bullet. We have to take the responsibility that we've abdicated for decades, and we have to put it into action. And I'm not talking about violently. If it ever gets to that, it'll be in response to them coming to us. We will not initiate any violence. We will do this peacefully. But in order for us to be successful, we have to come together and take back our responsibility that we've abdicated for decades. We have to. There is no choice anymore. If we cherish what we claim to cherish, freedom, liberty, justice, equality under the law, prosperity, and truth. Find me a Canadian that doesn't claim to cherish those values. Find me one. If you find me one, or 10 or 100, I'll call each of them communists, because that's what they are. Because they don't cherish those values. But the vast majority of Canadians do. The vast majority of Canadians don't understand that those values are under attack. It's our job to inform them. It's our job to educate them. It's our job to spread the message. And we can't just spread it within our own echo chambers. We have to get outside our echo chambers. We have to do this. Speaking of which, I'm banned on Facebook again because I denounced communism. Actually, the phrase I used toward somebody was, then burn it down like the communists want to. And she took offense and reported my comment. And I've been banned because, but that's exactly what the communists want. The communists want to burn it all down. They want to burn it all down. And from the ashes will come some sort of utopia, communist, socialist utopia, dystopia. But that's what they want. They want to burn it all down. I don't want to burn it down. I want to build it. I want to protect it. I want to defend it. I want to create something better. I want to create a better constitution. I want to reform our constitution. It desperately needs to be reformed. The only way that happens is with the people. The people have to demand it. And the only way the people are going to demand it is if the people understand and are educated and are informed. You know, there's a segment of the population, especially on social media, small but loud, that seem to default to the violent revolution position. If you think for a second that there's enough people that support that in this country, you are sadly mistaken. There isn't enough people right now, which I like to refer to as critical mass, that could actually change this country. There isn't enough of us yet. It's getting closer. And the more consequences that we're going to face through this globalist agenda, the more people are going to be awakened, the more people are going to have their bubble burst, and the more people are going to unite in defense of these values. But when we get to that point of critical mass, is when we're able to change something. We're able to affect change. It's the same point where you would be able to do something effectual through a violent rebellion or revolution. We're not even close to there. So to automatically default to that position is extremely naive. And it's a byproduct, quite frankly, of the society that we live in, where it's the quick fix, because there's people that don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to have to roll up their sleeves and actually get into something and dedicate themselves to this fight. They would rather just default to some violent, ridiculous rebellion that ain't gonna happen, because that's the easiest. And these are the same people that have never been in that situation. They have absolutely no idea how horrible that is. And that's what they're calling for. It's insane. Again, do the globalists have us on a very dark path? Yeah. Anti-hate and press progress and all these other idiots, they've all used me as an example because I've said this before. Do they have us on a dark path that at some point, if we don't start getting active and re-engage politically, that is it going to get nasty? Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. History tells us this. History shows us that when tyranny is in place, sooner or later, the people rise up. And they'll rise up violently. That's just a fact. That's just history telling us what's going to happen. Am I promoting it? No. But of course, press progress and anti-hate and all these other idiots and douchebags, they like to spin it to say that I'm promoting this, which I'm not. But the reality is, it's coming. So, anyways, I wanted to get a little bit of that off my chest. Give me 1 second here. Salim is yet to arrive. He's supposed to be here. Let me just give him a quick call. Give me 2 seconds. All right. Anyways, he's not answering, so he might have gotten sidetracked or something could have come up. So we'll just keep rambling until maybe he'll show up, or if he doesn't, it's good. And yes, I agree, D. Schultz, 100%. As Noam said, we need our arms. We do. We absolutely do. And that's why I said at the beginning of the show, do not give up any of your guns. Do whatever it takes. Fishing accident, boating accident, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. That's your call. That's your decision. Just don't give them up for nothing. Yes, absolutely, Zedmo. Energy poverty, food shortages, housing crisis, hyperinflation. Absolutely. We've seen it all before, haven't we? Canadians haven't suffered enough for a pushback to happen. Yeah, it's coming, though. It's coming. You can see it now, even with folks. Half of Canadians are this close to insolvency. They're this close to losing their house and not being able to pay the bills. And inflation isn't slowing down. Interest rates are going to climb. We told everybody, we told Canadians that if you vote for this idiot and the Liberals, or quite frankly, if you vote for the CPC, it doesn't matter. We're going to be in this position. We're in it because this is all part of the plan, right? To destroy Western civilization, to destroy the industrialized world. This is all about global governance and centralization of power, and to turn us into slaves. And how do you do that? Well, you destroy Western civilization. You attack the very freedoms that we enjoy. Do I have to play Dennis Meadows again from the Club of Rome? He said very clearly that we're at 7 or 8 billion. If we're going to have that many people, we need a dictatorship to tell everybody what to do. Or we have to reduce the population by 7 million back down to 1 billion, or 7 billion back down to 1 billion. He said it very clear. This is their agenda. This is what they want to do. It's population reduction, or it's a dictatorship. And this is what they want. This is what globalism is all about. This isn't globalization. Those two are very distinct. This is globalism. This is global governance. And so people need to understand that this is the path that they have us on. I'm just going to check to see some of the comments. Everyone isn't bottoming out at the same time. No, they're not. But they will. And very quickly, it's going to start happening. It's going to start unraveling. I can talk to my neighbors now, and they can barely afford to get groceries. They can barely afford to pay the bills. And once that starts happening and it starts mushrooming and snowballing, then, more and more people are going to say, hey, what the hell's going on? Even though we told them that these people are going to do this to us, who are we for them to listen to? I'm a voice in the wilderness. But we knew it was coming. I was a conspiracy theorist for 20 years before I could actually prove that this is happening. And so, it is what it is. I agree. It's close. End of the fall. Imagine not being able to pay your heating bill in the winter. Yeah, 100%. It's coming. And it has less to do with the Liberals than it does to do with the media and fear. Yeah, well, media plays a huge role, but they're all in cahoots, right? They're all part of the same plan. They're all part of the same thing. This is why the people are so important. And this is why I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is why Saskatchewan, this small little province of 1 million people, is extremely important in this fight. And this is why I hope to inspire the people of Saskatchewan to engage and exercise the power that they still have. I mean, it was the people of Saskatchewan that essentially ended the restrictions and mandates, other than the ones that Trudeau's hanging on to when it comes to travel. But it was Saskatchewan that first did it. And do you know why? It wasn't because of the convoy. That was part of it. That was some of it, part of the equation. Oh, hang on a sec. Salim is calling. One sec. Hello, Salim. All right, so Salim is coming. So, anyways, where was I? Yeah, great speech by speech with solution that Mr. Peckford was. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm hearing good things. People are sending a lot of stuff to me in that regard, so I have to listen to that after. So yeah, so it wasn't the convoy per se, although it had a lot to do with it. It was part of the equation, but it was also the Sask Party, the ruling party in Saskatchewan, in February had 10% of their normal donations at that point in time, historically. 10%. So their base, the Sask Party base, which is essentially rural Saskatchewan, the people of rural Saskatchewan have said no. And they said, absolutely, this is over. You better do what's right and lift these mandates and get back to business. And guess what? That's what Mo did. That's what Mo did. And as soon as Mo made that announcement, what happened? Well, the next day, Kenny's making an announcement that he's going to lift the mandates and restrictions sooner than Scott Moe because he has to be better. And so, you know, the people, the point is that the people, especially in Saskatchewan, still have this power and this opportunity. We could turn things around. We could lead the country and saying no to this. And so, on that note, myself and Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson, who managed to get back into her country with a little bit of struggle, but whatever, they're back in, and we're going to take it on the road in Saskatchewan. We got 9 cities we're going to do starting June 9th. And this is for me, this is part of the equation. We have to inform and educate, inspire and motivate the people around us in our communities, and that's what the theme of this whole tour is going to be. So we're starting in Yorkton on the 9th, and we got 9 cities that we're going to do in 9 days. And then once that tour is over, myself, Laura Lynn, and Sean Taylor are heading on the road to Northern Ontario to do the same thing there, 7 nights. Kenora, Dryden, Thunder Bay, Marathon, Sudbury, the Sioux, then Sudbury, then North Bay. And again, it's about education. It's about information. It's about inspiration and motivation. People have to have information to act and exercise the power that they have. Without it, they're useless. People are useless. And ignorance is a very dangerous thing. Ignorance has allowed Ukraine to happen. And what happened initially, as soon as Ukraine happened, everyone moved from COVID to rah, we're behind Ukraine without one critical thought as to what's happening with the Ukraine. And of course, when you stand up to it, you're vilified. I don't care because I know I'm right. And what's right is I support the people of the Ukraine because the people of the Ukraine are being used again as pawns of NATO, World Economic Forum, and their puppet leader, President Zelensky, who isn't in it for the best interest of the people of the Ukraine. He's in it for the World Economic Forum. He's in it for globalism. He's a puppet. And so the people of the Ukraine are being used. And I feel terrible for the people of the Ukraine. But everyone in the media, everyone that immediately jumps on the bandwagon have absolutely no context. They have absolutely no idea what they're supporting. And so the flags for Ukraine go up around the world because they're told to by their media, and they're just clapping show seals, right? They're just, here, have a fish and clap when I tell you to, right? That's what people do. And so we have to stop that. And it's going to take more than just me and a number of others. It's going to take all of us. We have to do this. The people have to do this. Immigrants will not listen and vote for a white Christian leader unless they're promised a free ride. Yeah, well, there is that problem. But not all immigrants. I know a lot of solid immigrants that have immigrated from Eastern Bloc countries and other countries, war-torn countries, and they don't want what they're seeing in Canada is what they've fled from, and they don't want to see Canada go down that road. There's been a ton in this freedom movement in Canada of immigrants that have and stand at the front of the line, right? So in some ways that statement's right, but in some ways it's actually very wrong. But I know what you're saying. Anyways, I see that my good friend Salim Mansur is now backstage. He found his way, and we can carry on and talk a little bit about George Soros and some of the happenings this past week, obviously relative to what we've just been discussing for the last little while. So without further ado, my good friend Salim Mansur. How are you, Salim?
I was in a state of confusion over the last little while.
That's okay.
When I didn't get a response to the text that I wrote you, I took a break and I went to say my prayers, evening prayers, and then you called me and I missed your call. And then I see that when I went into my system, I see that you are on TikTok, and I couldn't believe what is TikTok, and I registered with TikTok and nothing happened. So then, then your things showed up. Your link for StreamYard showed up, but prior to that, there was a link for TikTok. So, are you doing a TikTok also simultaneously?
No, we don't live stream to TikTok. I haven't figured out how to do it yet, but there is a live option. I just haven't figured out if StreamYard if we can do that. But I'll get there. One other note that you're probably not aware of is I'm banned on Facebook again because I denounced communism. So, the last time I was banned, it was because I denounced Nazis in Ukraine, and that was bad, I guess. So this time I denounced communism and I found myself banned again. So, it is what it is.
So communism is now how should I define it? It's a no-go area for any one of us talking about communism?
Well, I guess it's probably how I used it in the wording of a comment. I basically told somebody then just burn it down like the communists want us to, and Facebook didn't like that. She reported me. It was somebody had initiated this, so I appealed. We'll see what happens. But
so what about that's Facebook decision, but in terms of terminology and words and meanings, what about globalism? Is that also now a no-go term, or will become a no-go term?
It's probably heading in that direction, would be my guess. Yeah, it's the same. It's one of the same. So they've tried to relate that verbiage to being anti-Semitic, right? So I don't know.
So eventually, we will be confined to a very small space, politically correct, and the rest will be no-go area.
Yeah, it appears that way. But again, as I said in my lengthy intro, we have to stand to this. I actually showed a video of Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, her speech at the NRA this last couple days. A phenomenal speech, fantastic. I encourage everyone to watch it. But I showed it tonight, and she's absolutely correct that it's our responsibility. We have to defend these rights. We have to defend, and in their case, they have to defend their Constitution. They have to defend their Second Amendment, their First Amendment. It's up to the people to do that, and we're no different. Just that we don't have that Constitution. We still have to defend what we believe. We still have to stand for what we believe, even though our Constitution is weak, even though our Charter of Rights and Freedoms is weak. We still have a responsibility. We can't just lay down because our Constitution is weak. We have to stand and defend the values that we cherish. And if it needs to be fixed, then we fix the Constitution. Then we create one that represents our values, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I believe also President Trump, I haven't seen his speech nor read his text, but that's on my plate. I have to do that. President Trump gave a very powerful speech at the NRA, also related to the tragedy in Uvalde, Texas. But there are so many questions now behind it, that are these tragedies actually orchestrated tragedies or not?
Right. Exactly.
For reasons.
Well, and that's it. I mean, and for you to say that, or for me to say that, we're going to be called conspiracy theorists. But at the end of the day, we know that these people will stop at nothing to forward their agenda. And the agenda is to destroy the Western world, destroy freedoms, destroy liberty, so they can achieve their goals of global governance, right? And so we know this, we understand this. But of course, their response to what we're saying is that we're just conspiracy theorists, so they can dismiss us.
Yeah. On that note, there is the new information that has come out again from sources that are from within the deep state, that the Buffalo shooter was talking with an FBI agent who had retired recently. Right. Have you read about that?
I heard about it. Yeah.
So this FBI agent was not only in consultation with the FBI, with the Buffalo shooter, but he was the last man to whom the Buffalo shooter sent a message before he went on his killing spree. Right. And again, it raises all sorts of questions. What is this happening? I mean, is this again something that is orchestrated from behind the scene for its effects that the deep state want to see happen? And it right. takes us all the way back to, again, conspiracy theory, but it takes us all the way back to 9/11.
Absolutely, 100%. Yep. So Salim, we could probably spend a little time on that whole topic, but we wanted to discuss a little bit about, as the title suggests in the show tonight, George Soros has reared his ugly head again, and we should spend a little time talking about what he's been up to, what he's been saying, and who he's been arguing with.
Yes, let's do that. I mean, well, this is the annual festival that the World Economic Forum holds in Davos, in springtime Davos. And this was what was happening the last week. I saw the banner of the World Economic Forum annual meeting or annual conference 2022, and it was prominent on the banner. It was called the World Summit Meeting. Did you see that thing highlighted?
Yes.
So it was a World Summit meeting of the one world government. That in effect, they are no longer hiding that fact. This is right in the face of anybody who wants to question it, right. That these meetings are about one world government, the World Summit, which is being led by, or the networking face of that is the Davos crowd, the World Economic Forum, and the people who gather there. So George Soros was there, and among the people, and there was that debate um, between the position of George Soros on the one side and Henry Kissinger on the other side. I think that was the key debate of all the issues in, in Davos that happened. Kissinger, I believe, was not there in person, so his speech was relayed through video
Right.
address, and George was personally there,
Mm.
and the position reflected the two views. Um, Possibly those two views are now in some sort of a competition, a conflict inside the World Economic Forum and among the leadership of the World Economic Forum at the EU, the European Union, and also in America. Um, One view is represented by Henry Kissinger, and the other view by George Soros. So let me take Henry Kissinger first, because he spoke first, or
Sure.
his speech was broadcast first on the video to the people at the forum. We all know who Henry Kissinger is, or we all should know who Henry Kissinger is, former Secretary of State, former National Security Advisor. And in terms of the World Economic Forum, uh, the patron saint, you might say, of World Economic Forum, because he's the man who basically mentored and taught and put in position where Klaus Schwab is today.
Right.
So
Mm.
that goes back to the 1960s when Kissinger was at Harvard University, and Klaus Schwab had come.
And
Schwab had-
but this is what makes this so interesting, is that you have these two globalists that are now openly disagreeing with each other on some level.
Yeah, it is, and we must pay close attention to it, and we must also try to understand what is it about behind the open sort of disagreement that people are going to refer to.
Right.
That behind the open disagreement that is visible or palpable in what they said, behind what does it mean, how do we make sense of this,
Right.
what is the
Right.
what is the backstory behind this,
Mhm.
and that is also very critical to unravel and to understand. So given Henry Kissinger's position in the politics in America in terms of the grand strategy, the big deep thinking that has gone on over the last, more than half century, uh, where Henry Kissinger comes into play.
Mhm.
That is from the 1960s to where we are today. It's almost 60 years. Uh, and then on the other side is George Soros.
Right.
Both, by the way, in the 90s. Henry Kissinger, I think, celebrated his 99th birthday this past month.
Yeah.
So he's 99-year-old, going on to 100.
Well, they both have a foot in the grave.
Yeah, the question is when. And um, and George Soros is a younger man, but he's also in his 90s, 92, 93. I don't know exactly what his age is,
Right.
but we can check it out. So Kissinger is the older person between the two of them, so he's the senior person. What Kissinger said, so let's get into the words, and then we
Yeah.
can do the back and forth. What Kissinger said is that it is a horrible mistake that is being made by the West, particularly his own government, that is the American government of the Biden administration, and the people who are running the Biden administration
Mm.
in terms of the decision making vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine.
Right.
He has come out flat out against the position that so far is the official position of the Biden administration, that is to, in effect, fight the Russian to the last Ukrainian standing, not to allow Zelensky or not to give him any permission to enter into any sort of negotiation for an end to the war, or to talk about what will be the terms by which to end the war and
Right.
make a settlement with Putin and with Moscow. So Kissinger has now come out flat out. But in that sense, I must point out that Kissinger has and remains consistent. It was Kissinger in 2014 that basically did not agree with what was happening in terms of the Maidan revolution, which was precipitated by the push by the neocons and the right sector in Ukraine for Ukraine to become a member of NATO.
Right.
And Kissinger, he's on record, his Washington Post article from 2014 was basically against it, that there is no reason to push NATO right into the backyard, the porch, the front porch of Moscow, of Russia. And he was recalling those agreements that had been made and promised that NATO would not expand eastward towards Russia. So he's on record, he's consistent. But once the war broke out, he has now publicly come out and said that this is uncalled for, but more importantly, that this is extremely dangerous.
Right.
This war, there's on one side the real fear of escalation if this war is not quickly brought to an end by diplomacy and negotiation. There is a possibility of escalation, and that escalation can go, one can recall the Cuban Missile Crisis. That escalation can reach a very dangerous level and could even go nuclear, because the issue is existential to Russia on the question of NATO,
Right.
and Ukraine becoming a platform for the Americans. So that is his position. But then he goes on to talk about what this war has done, and it has to be in somehow controlled, and if possible undone, is that this war has brought Russia and China into a very close embrace, and united Russia and China together as a result of this war. And this is something that Kissinger has worked all his life in terms of his professional career as a diplomat, statesman, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, that he has worked through and with Nixon and then his successor, President Ford, to widen the difference between Russia and China, to open a wedge between Russia and China and keep them apart instead of seeing that they become one, two land powers joined together with a Eurasian power. And so he is warning against that, and he wants to see this brought to a very quick end. And a final footnote to his argument is, which is, of course, in more ways than we have the time to go into, but it captures the whole issue of Russia-China alliance. It is that Russia, for 400 years, this is Kissinger saying, Russia for 400 years has been an intimate part of the European balance of power.
Right.
And therefore, Russia should not be isolated. Russia is part of Europe, and we should end this war and try to recreate that balance that has been destroyed or is being destroyed as a result of this war, with all the other implication, that is the implication in economic matters and the implication in terms of the new alliances that will result as a consequence of this war, which is already happening, and we can talk about it. You showed that map last week of the split that has now emerged very clearly in the world, and I think that split is the great rupture, and it is going to become deeper and become wider. On the other hand, George Soros spoke in complete opposite to what Kissinger was saying and is saying, and is as an elder statesman. People who still pay attention to him, and a lot of people pay attention to him. I think it is a mistaken view not to listen to people like Kissinger, whether one agrees with him or disagrees with him, and whatever may be the personal views about the man. He is, by a lot of people, held in high regards in the Western world, in America, in Europe, etc. And many Russians and Chinese will listen to Kissinger very closely because of his long engagement with these countries. Kissinger was a key player in the SALT negotiation, that is a strategic arms limitation talks, in the 1970s with President Nixon and then with President Ford. And of course, Kissinger was the key person in the opening to China that brought President Nixon to visit China in February of 1972 and talk with Mao Zedong. So that record makes Kissinger in truly one of the very few people alive today who has that background, of being paid very serious attention by people around the world. China, Japan, Russia, India, the Middle East. He negotiated the first ceasefire and peace agreements treaty that eventually led to the recognition by Egypt of Israel and Israel of Egypt, and the withdrawal and the peace treaty that was signed. But it all began with Kissinger, so his position in places like Egypt and Turkey and so on. So his position is that, he's saying, bring this war to an end, reestablish the balance of power, don't do any further damage that has already been done. And who has done the damage? Well, that's another conversation that we can get into, another analysis. But George Soros takes a 180-degree opposite position to Kissinger, and he says the time is running out. Russia has to be defeated. It's not about Russia has to be negotiated with. Russia has to be defeated. Russia is the main obstacle to the globalist agenda, the World Economic Forum agenda, where he's talking about it, one world government, world summit. And Russia needs to be defeated, because without defeating Russia, you cannot defeat China. And so Soros's message is very clear: defeat Russia with whatever is required, whatever risk that has to be taken. Defeat Russia in Ukraine, given the capacity that the Americans and the Europeans together have through NATO, and prepare for the next contest in terms of establishing the one world government, which is the next conflict would be with China. So if you look at it in terms of metaphor, Kissinger turns out to be the dove, and Soros turns out to be the hawk on the question of globalism. And I say that on the basis of the following uh, view I have, that neither Kissinger nor Soros, in the back, behind the curtain, have in any way abandoned that large term goal of world government, of
Right.
one
100%.
borderless world, you know.
Yeah.
So it is the question of how to get there. What are the obstacles? How to deal with those obstacles? The obstacles meaning the countries that are standing in the way of the globalist agenda,
Right.
and the hawkishness of Soros seems to me more or less a reflection in a psychological term, which is not there in the case of Kissinger, at least not there visibly. That is, Soros sees the time is running out, that either this is done,
That's
Russia is defeated, or the globalist agenda will collapse. There is the end. The point has reached. We are
desperation.
from the perspective of Soros and the people behind him, including Klaus Schwab,
Well,
that
and,
that
and
if Russia is not defeated, if this war turns out to be the defeat of the European Union and NATO, then it is the defeat of globalism.
well, and it also, I think, runs in, and you'll understand this as well as anyone. When we look at the mindset, when we look at the psychology of these people, the Club of Rome people, and you're talking about depopulation, and when you have Dennis Meadows speaking about reducing the population from 8 billion to 1 billion, to hear a guy like Soros promoting the idea of defeating Russia and pushing Russia to the brink. Well, what does the brink mean? That means nuclear war. And, who's going to be left after some sort of a nuclear exchange? Not a lot of people, right? Potentially. So, it doesn't surprise me that somebody like a Soros, who I consider to be a very evil man, would take the position that he's taking.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why I said, this is at a psychological level. I mean, the time is running out. They are pathological people. As you say, they're evil people. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, every aspect of the World Economic Forum cabal is evil. I mean, we have been talking about over the last few weeks, focusing on the Ukraine war, how the West has basically shown its true face. That is the leadership in the West, the cabal that runs the West, has shown its true face, and that face is Nazism. It is no longer hidden. I'm pointing this out in many different ways. I mean, multiculturalism began as an ideology, and Canada was the laboratory. This is the place where it was first introduced. It became an official policy, and it has ended up in our Constitution, that is the Charter of Rights and Freedom,
Yes.
Section 27. There it is, But it all began so harmlessly, as if, it was such a wonderful idea. It was apple pie and motherhood when Pierre Elliott Trudeau spoke about multiculturalism in 1972, when most of the people in our show, and if you don't mind my saying so, including you, were not around at that time. Remember, in 72, when all of this came on, and nobody opposed Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I mean, Robert Stanfield, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, Tommy Douglas of the NDP, they all celebrated, yeah, we are going to be a multicultural society,
Right.
and so on and so forth. But it was the slippery slope. I mean, I was isolated and shunned when I published my book some 12, 13 years ago, but I've been speaking about that, and the book was my final statement on that matter. I was shunned and ostracized. I paid my price, and I might end up paying more. I don't know. But I pointed out that when all cultures are equal, then that is the beginning of undermining and subverting the founding culture of the West, of Canada. That to say that all cultures are equal, that the culture of Canada is equal to the culture of the Taliban, is the beginning of, by equalizing the both cultures, the beginning of the subversion of the Canadian culture, the founding culture.
The exact opposite of diversity.
Yeah. So now you can see that that what began so harmlessly as apple pie and motherhood was what we have arrived at: cancel culture, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, political correctness, man as a woman, man can be pregnant, and on and on and on, that is the destruction of the founding value of the Western civilization, that is at its core a Christian civilization, and if you undermine and destroy it, then you remove the guardrail, then anything and everything is possible. So it began from there. And where have we arrived at? We have arrived at, if all cultures are equal, well, then Nazi culture is also fine. And Nazism is about depopulation, is about, gas chambers, is about getting, eugenics. It is about all of that, which has been the history of modern North America and Western Europe since the end of the Second World War. But it was hidden. It was hidden behind the politics of the Cold War, that the West is a free, democratic, civilization. We uphold freedom and so on and so forth, respect. And we all agreed with that because that is the founding culture of the West. I mean, when you go and look at the American Constitution, not the Canadian Constitution, the American Constitution is the first articulation of the value of modernity in terms of Enlightenment value, going all the way back to Galileo, Newton, Locke, and so on and so forth, that creates the modern world. It is not anti-Christian. It is the secularism in which religion and politics are to be held separately, but not a denigration of religion, because the values of religion are the values of that culture at its fundamental level, So that is the foundation. And what multiculturalism did, or beginning of it, was to wipe it out. This was a Marxist agenda. This was critical race theory. Yes. This was communism. This was one world government, to wipe out, because only by wiping out the fundamental value upon which the Western civilization is built can it be possible to have the Marxist value. Yes. You see? So, but the Cold War kept the mask, and we all believe that, because on the other side of the Cold War was the Soviet Union, communism, and so on and so forth, and so the world was divided. So the world was not only one cultural civilization. We're talking about the West. There is a Chinese civilization, there's the Indian civilization, there is the Islamic civilization, there is the Latin civilization, etc., etc. But I'm talking in terms of the West. And the rest of the other civilizations and cultures, they also had their opposition to communism, and so they rallied behind the West, or they supported the West. But once communism collapsed, or official communism collapsed and disintegrated, 1991, the end of the Soviet Union, what happened? It is like in a twinkling of an eye, 30 years. Within this 30 years, what we saw was the beginning of multiculturalism, critical race theory, same-sex marriage, homosexuality, LGBTQ, abortion on demand, that is eugenics. This was all happening during the period when the Soviet Union was around, but still we believed in the fundamental constitutional system that we are democratic and Soviet Union is communist. But once that mask fell and Soviet Union no longer was there, it had collapsed, what emerged was Russia, Russian Federation, and other independent states of the former Soviet Union. The West no longer had to maintain the mask, and the mask was open. And here we are, embracing the Nazis.
Right.
You know, we are, in that sense, what the Nazis experimented, we now are ready to embrace through World Economic Forum.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of the same actors, come from that. I mean, look at Klaus Schwab's family tree. Look at Soros's family tree. I mean, we're talking about actual people that, were Nazis or worked for the Nazis. So,
but when you go back to Europe, this is the critical issue. Europe has been the ground of all of these experimentation, going all the way back to, say, the Inquisition. That is, the Catholic Church and the Inquisition. That is the massacre, the warfare, the question of who is a heretic, who is an apostate, burning at the stake, on and on in Europe. Europe has been the battleground not only of the last century, 2 world wars, but the battleground for 1,000+ years. I mean, the opposition or conflict between Orthodox Christianity and Roman Catholicism is over 1,000-year old, between Constantinople and Rome. And then when Constantinople collapsed and was conquered by the Turks, then the Patriarch of Constantinople, Patriarchy of Constantinople, the Orthodox Patriarchy, moved to Moscow, Kiev Rus. Kiev Rus is the sacred ground of Orthodox Christianity in Eastern Europe,
right,
which becomes Russia, right? So the conflict between Constantinople and Rome goes back to 1,000+ years, and that conflict then carried on throughout that 1,000 years.
Right.
You see the Roman Catholic Church in opposition to the Orthodox, and the Orthodox in opposition to the Roman Catholics. And in our lifetime, that is in the 20th century, that conflict was played out between the animosity of the Poles, the Germans, the Hungarians, the Austrians, the Romanians. These are all part of the Roman Catholic Church against the Serbians, against the Russians, against the Slavic people who are Orthodox, and that was played out during the Second World War. It's now being played out between the Poles and the Russians. Poles and the Russians fought the Germans. Now the Poles are fighting the Russians. The Poles hate the Russians possibly more than they hate, whoever else they want to hate. So this has been the ground. And what has happened is all of that has been imported into North America. Instead of immigrants coming to North America, leaving their own cultural values in terms of love and hate behind wherever they are, because they are escaping from that.
Right.
They have brought it with them.
Right.
The Europeans have brought it with them, and now the people from the third world have brought it with them.
Right.
And so this is where we are. But this conflict is also the instrument by which the globalists can achieve their power. Because the globalist says, we want to have peace and order. So we will impose the peace and order. The greater the conflict, the greater the demand for peace and order.
Right.
If a cyclone is raging at 10 or whatever the standard is, or if the earthquake is at the Richter scale of 10, then the demand from the people would be for a government that is strong enough to meet their demands as a result of the destruction caused by the earthquake or by the cyclone. And similarly, in the political realm, where the conflict is massive, then the demand for the people will be, let's have a government that can suppress all of these conflicts and bring about some sense of safety and security. So wars and conflicts provide to the cabal that wants more power the best opportunity for having more power. On one side you have wars, and now we have the pandemic. So whichever it is, what creates the greatest fear and the greatest disruption is also the instrument for the greatest control that governments or people with power want. And so this is where we are now. We're seeing the inversion, and all of this has come together in Ukraine. Ukraine is not simply now, and in my view, if we go back to our very first conversation, I pointed this out. Ukraine is not simply a matter of a war between Russia and Ukraine, that Ukraine wants to exercise its national sovereignty and therefore its freedom to join the NATO. And Russia has no complaint and should not have any complaint. And therefore, Putin, what he has done, he has invaded Ukraine and taken away Ukraine's freedom to make its own decision, which is the narrative of Justin Trudeau. It is the narrative of Biden. It is the narrative of Chrystia Freeland, that Putin is the invader. Putin has invaded Ukraine and stopped Ukraine from making its own decision as a free country. And therefore, we have to defend the freedom of Ukraine.
Which is so insane. I mean, even as we've spoken about this before at the Maidan protests, half the crowd is filled with EU flags, where it's supposed to be this ultra-nationalist group that wants to maintain, the integrity of the Ukraine and keep it Ukrainian and all this stuff. At the same time, they put in place Zelensky, who's a World Economic Forum puppet, and all of it leads to this globalist agenda, which will do nothing but destroy any nationalism in Ukraine whatsoever, the destruction of the nation state. So, I mean, it's just.
But that is the narrative, isn't it? I mean, that's what Boris Johnson, Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, Biden, all of these people are there to defend freedom. If you ask them, what about the defense of freedom of Canadians, of Americans, of the British? Then no, we have a pandemic and we have to take away that freedom. So from the beginning, I pointed this out, that the war in Ukraine is not a war of simply Russia and Ukraine. It is a war of globalism and the right of Russia to maintain its own security. Security, when it comes to the issue, which is, again, one of the critical aspects of this conflict, cannot be indivisible. It cannot be, security cannot be that it is my security at your expense or your security at my expense. So it has to be indivisible, and it has to guarantee the security of all. And that was what has been Putin's position, and the position of all the Russian leaders on this matter. So this has been the globalist war. So coming back to George Soros and Henry Kissinger is a diplomat. I'm just trying to find the correct adjective to describe him without any animus.
Yeah.
That is, in historical terms, people like, diplomats like Talleyrand of France, Richelieu of France. In the case of Britain, Churchill, of course, Palmerston, and so on. Metternich of Austria. Henry Kissinger, in that sense, is a diplomat par excellence. He's an outstanding man of diplomacy in terms of and a diplomat works for his country, right? So the national interests of the country is at stake, and so on. I mean, Stalin had his own diplomats like Molotov, who negotiated the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, right. Knowing very well, that it could blow up in the face, which eventually it did.
But with Kissinger, though, didn't he? I see Kissinger as always having this ulterior motive while representing the best interest of the states. There was always this something else going on, right?
100%, and that something else that is going on that Kissinger not only played to, but others played to it. That means he is part of that group. And that going on, you're referring to globalism. And as I have pointed out, that globalism in the context of American politics goes all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. That is before Kissinger was born. That is the progressive agenda. The League of Nations. The League of Nations was the first attempt in world government, and the only reason it failed, or the most important reason, not the only reason, but the most important reason it failed, was that President Woodrow Wilson did not and could not get the support that was needed constitutionally from the Senate. The Republicans in the Senate stopped him, and therefore America could not become a member of the League of Nations, and America went into isolation. So there is that divide. There was that divide in American politics, and these are things to be explored and understood. When people, and I know there are a lot of people, who like to put labels. It's as if you're playing a baseball game. So I put on the Yankee cap and I play for the Yankees. But tomorrow I can go and play for the Red Sox or for the Oakland Athletics, because the game is the game, and what you're playing for is simply the people who have to put up different teams to play for the,
they do that
for
because
the game.
It's very simplistic to do that, right? It's easy to do that.
Exactly. Well, so Kissinger comes into the front ranks of diplomacy as a result of his being selected by President Nixon. Because if Kissinger had not been, this is the what if of history, if Kissinger had not been selected by President Nixon to become his national security advisor in 1968 after winning the election, then it's quite possible, that Kissinger would have remained a Harvard professor at Harvard University. He would not have been moving around the world stage, whether it is on Vietnam, whether on Indonesia, on Pak. Look, I mean, I come from the history where people of my generation, my parents' generation, have paid in blood for the policy of Nixon, Kissinger in India, Pakistan, that led to genocide in Bangladesh, So, and I've written about this, and it's been published in books in America about the Kissinger foreign policy, Nixon Kissinger foreign policy, that have caused tremendous harm to people of the third world, in Vietnam, Cambodia, East Timor, and so on and so forth. And in my part of the world, East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, India. And I have had that personal experience as a teenager that I escaped from, and I can look back, but I have to put all of that aside when I'm looking at it in terms of philosophy, in terms of political, national interest, global politics. You put all of that aside. You have to concentrate and understand history, not from the sense of your own suffering, but as what has happened in world terms. So Kissinger comes into politics with Nixon, but Kissinger was serving as a counselor and advisor to Nelson Rockefeller, the Rockefeller family. And who are the Rockefeller family? They're the globalists.
Yes, 100%.
Yep. But by the time the Rockefeller family, who Kissinger was serving as a counselor, sends him, Nelson Rockefeller was a Republican, sends him with his resume to Nixon, and Nixon then hires him as his national security advisor. The backstory is globalism, but in that globalism, it is the Americans who are involved.
Right.
And a very quick note. I mean, again, there is a lot of history here, but a very quick equation. We would not be talking about World Economic Forum and globalism and UN Agenda 2030 and UN Millennium Goal and UN Sustainable Development Goals. We would not be talking about this if the Americans were not on board with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Okay? Yes.
Which American? The Uni Party. First, it is the Democrats, but then the Republicans got into it.
Yep.
So it is a Uni Party. The man who stood against it in modern time, that is in the period from the Earth Summit in 1992 to where we are now, the only American president who stood against it, who got elected and stood against, was Donald Trump.
Trump, yeah.
He was the America First nationalist. Only one. So to go back to who are the America First nationalists, you have to go back to before Woodrow Wilson's time.
Yeah. Right.
You see, because at the time of Woodrow Wilson, the Republican Party, there were enough people who were opposed to the ideas of Woodrow Wilson and progressivism, among which is the goal of one world government.
Right.
That there were Republicans who were opposed to it. But after Woodrow Wilson, and especially after Second World War, it is the Republicans and the Democrats are together on this.
Yes.
The only difference is, again, whether you're wearing a Yankee hat or whether you're wearing a Boston Red Sox hat.
Doesn't matter. Still the same league.
It is on the global stage, it doesn't matter. On the American stage, who is going to be the driver of the program?
Exactly. And you can apply that same thing to Canadian politics as well.
Absolutely. But since you raised the issue of Canadian, I would make one qualifier and I'll leave it for a future discussion.
Yeah.
That qualifier is, it is now very clear Canada has been a vassal state right from the beginning.
Yes.
We were the vassal state of the British Empire, and then we became the vassal state of the American Empire in the period after 1945, especially after the defeat of the Diefenbaker government in 1963 with the Bomarc missile crisis that completely exposed the position of Canada, that Canada is a buffer state between Soviet Union and America in the age of intercontinental ballistic missile and nuclear warfare. So we have no choice. We are a vassal state. And now, under Justin Trudeau, we are a vassal state in a double sense, both of American empire and of the World Economic Forum, Davos, which is the public face of globalism. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
But back to George Soros and Kissinger, which is a fascinating in terms of anyone, especially historians and students wanting to write an academic thesis, or journalists trying to explain. And these two are the two different faces. And the face of Kissinger is the sophisticated diplomatic face that, you don't push, you don't try to break an egg if you can avoid breaking an egg, and so the globalist agenda has reached a very critical stage. The war in Ukraine, which has brought everything together, but quickly end this war, find a way out. Even if you have to postpone the agenda, let's postpone it, because the destruction is going to be huge and immense. And possibly, if this war is lost, see what Kissinger is saying, negotiate. He's not saying surrender. Negotiate an end to the war, and meet whatever there is the demand of the two sides, find a meeting ground and settle it. So if the meeting ground is Russia wants a guarantee that Ukraine has to be a neutral state, that it cannot be a member of NATO, and put it in writing, Kissinger is basically saying in so many words, let's do it. Because the globalist agenda is even bigger than whether Ukraine becomes a member of NATO state. Let's postpone it. We don't have.
Soros is more scorched earth.
That's right. So he's far more sophisticated. He's trying to, find a way to. That was what the arms limitation talks is. Remember, a diplomat is engaged in by knowing that he's going to go into a negotiation, which he's not going to get all the marbles that he wants, nor is he going to surrender all the marbles to the other party who wants all the marble for themselves. So it is to find a nice balance where you can walk away with both parties satisfied with the amount of marbles they have for themselves at this point in time, postpone it to some future date in time where the stronger party will eventually prevail. So that is Kissinger's.
And so that I think that really does a nice job of explaining why we're seeing this, discussion between the two, or open debate between the two. And so I think we've achieved what we wanted to accomplish tonight. I'm at an hour and 43 minutes.
Yes.
I'd like to upload this. As you know, now we're on podcast, Apple Podcasts, we're on Podbean, and we're also on Spotify. We're on a number of others who are affiliated to those three. So our audience is growing through the podcasting, which is good. So I want to keep these relatively, under 2 hours for sure, but around the hour and a half mark if possible. But tonight was what it was because we had some confusion. So it's all good.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry about a little confusion on my part in the beginning.
Yeah, it's all good, my friend. Thanks again for joining us, and your wisdom is cherished by all that listen to us. So thank you, Salim.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye now.
Bye.
All right. Another round with Salim. Yeah, it's important to put things in a context so people understand, the context of the day plus the historical context and how all of these things fit. Because you're not going to convince people that, this globalist agenda is real without attaching context and historical context to these discussions. So people, we're not just blowing hot air. That we've come to these conclusions, that we've come to this place for a reason, and it's understanding the why. People still have a hard time wrapping their head around why would governments use COVID-19 to achieve some globalist goal. It sounds crazy to them. It sounds, completely nuts, but it's actually a fact that they did. And, I mean, they they were developing in a lab a virus where they would attach these proteins, spike proteins, to the common cold and release it on to the masses so they then could take advantage of the consequences they created. And so they could achieve the goals of globalism. So, it's hard for people to wrap their head around that. It's hard for people to understand the context of that without giving them proof that this is what they're doing. They won't believe it unless you can do it. And even sometimes when you can do it effectively, you still have people that question if that's in fact the case. But it is what it is. And they've been doing it forever. Climate change, trying to create fear to manipulate the masses so they'll agree to hand over the money so they can fund this agenda through carbon tax. They use the fear of a pandemic, which was never a pandemic. The numbers don't suggest ever that it was a pandemic. It was a little worse than the common cold, but everybody agreed to lock themselves down and to destroy their businesses because of the fear that was established. And they used that to accomplish the goals of sustainable development. This is why it's so important that in a Conservative Party leadership race, we expose these people for what they are, because they don't denounce the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is why the World Economic Forum exists in the first place. The primary objective isn't the Great Reset. That's just simply secondary to the greater agenda, which is sustainable development, which no prospective Conservative Party leadership contender has ever denounced. And why haven't they denounced it? Because they're responsible for it, because they're committed to it, because they're globalist just as much as the liberals are. The sooner conservatives, who seem to cherish the same values I do, understand this, the sooner we can take our country back, denounce globalism fully, back out of all this horse shit, and live off our own resources and sell those resources to the world that still needs them. Bingo, bango, Bob's your uncle. We have our country back. We have prosperity. We have truth. We have freedom. We have liberty. We have justice. It's just that easy. But you got to want it, and you got to understand why. So that's why we spend the time we spend on this. Yeah, exactly, Carly. Max denounces it every day. He's denounced it since day one. Well, okay, maybe not exactly day one. I helped him the first year to come to the point, but I mean, it's the only party that exists that's denouncing globalism. We've denounced the UN agenda as a party. Max, as a leader, has denounced the full agenda, the SDGs, all of it. He's denounced it, all of it. Not one conservative has ever denounced it because they're responsible for it. The liberals won't denounce it because they love it. It's communism on a global scale. It's centralized global governance, and it's communism and it's fascism because they're together. And so, but somehow I still have to explain to people what the solution is. Well, the solution is to elect somebody and to promote somebody that denounces the Sustainable Development Goals. That's it. It's that simple. Everything is related to that agenda. All of it. All of it. So, there you go. I don't know what else to tell you. That's it. Anyways, I have to talk a little bit about what's happening in the near future. June 9th, the Let Freedom Reign tour with myself, Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson, and and Pastor Paul Dubois, who's organizing the tour, along with Daryl Cooper. And R.B. Ham will be joining us on that as well. That starts on the 9th in Yorkton, and I don't know the schedule offhand exactly. Maybe I can pull it up here real quick. Give me a second, and I'll do it. Let's see. I just have to find it. There it is. So June 9th, Yorkton, and venues haven't been determined or established yet, so that'll be yet to come. But Yorkton on the 9th, Melfort on the 10th, Prince Albert on the 11th, Saskatoon on the 12th, North Battleford on the 13th, Lloydminster on the 14th, Swift Current on the 15th, Weyburn on the 16th, and Regina on the 17th to wrap it up. So that's the 9th to the 17th. Myself, Laura Lynn, Pastor Paul Dubois, and Daryl Cooper, and R.B. Ham. So if you live in any of those places, get the word out. Try to get some people to attend these things who are maybe on the fence, who maybe don't know what's really going on, and we're going to help them connect some dots. We're going to help them understand what's going on. And we're going to hopefully give them some hope, and we're going to give some people some motivation and some inspiration. So looking forward to that. Then 4 days later, Sean Taylor will arrive in Saskatoon, and we'll start heading east. Laura Lynn and her husband will be in their RV. Me and Sean will be in my truck, and we'll be heading east. Of course, we have Kenora on the 23rd. We have Dryden on the 24th. We have Thunder Bay on the 25th. We have Marathon on the 26th. We have the Sault Ste. Marie on the 27th. We have Sudbury on the 28th, and we have North Bay on the 29th. We have contacts in all of those places that are working to establish a venue, except Marathon. So if there's anybody out there that's from Marathon or an area that knows people in Marathon, we're still looking for somebody that can help us organize that. So you're welcome, Rob. So anyways, if there's somebody out there that can get in touch with us, that'd be great. Send me an email to info@ffcs.info, and we'll start getting that going. Whatever. If it doesn't work out, Marathon's a small town, so not a big place. We'll see. Maybe it'll just be a night for us to relax a little bit. Who knows? But we sure like to be able to offer a town hall there as well. And then we have Ottawa. Ottawa Canada Day. It'll be at the Supreme Court. It has a nice big open park in the front. It has a built-in stage. There's no construction like there is over at Parliament. So we thought that would be a much better place. We're looking at tentatively. We have, of course, myself and Laura Lynn. Maxine Bernier will speak. We're working on inviting Brian Peckford. Police on Guard will hopefully have a representative speaking on their behalf. Veterans for Freedom will hopefully have a representative speaking on their behalf. Of course, the nurses, Kristen Nagel, I touched base with her. She said she'll be there. They'd love to speak, so they'll be there in attendance. James Top, of course, will be rolling in to Ottawa on June 30th. We've invited James to speak as well on Canada Day. So we hope that we can put that together. And what else do you want? That's a hell of a speakers list. So, that's that. Nothing, huge. It's going to be run from 11 till 4 or 5, whatever. We just want to bring people together. We just want people to actually just enjoy themselves, right? There's no big mission. It's just, let's come together, let's unite around these values that we share, and let's have a nice event. Celebrate what we've accomplished to this point, because we're in a battle, we're in a war, and we have won some battles, and we have to recognize that. We have to lift our spirits, we have to inspire each other, we have to motivate each other. And so that's what we're hoping to achieve with this. There's no big mission, there's no big, we're gonna take over the government, none of that talk. It's just, let's just come together and unite and just have a decent event, in unity around values that we cherish. That's it. And Trudeau can do whatever he wants, wherever the hell he wants. He can have that nonsense wherever he wants it, and we'll do our thing. So that's it. So that's what it is. So thanks, MEC. Safe drive, Grizzly Patriot, and thank you so much for your effort to educate us. God bless free Canada. If by chance you visit Barrie, it would be a blessing for us. Yeah, Maria, we talked about that. I talked to Laura Lynn, and she had mentioned that Barrie was looking at maybe hosting something on the 30th, but that's going to be really tough. We'd like to be in Ottawa on the 30th. Because that's when James Topp is hoping to walk his final leg to Ottawa, and we'd like to be part of that. So we're going to have to leave pretty early from North Bay that morning to make it in time. And then, of course, it makes it obviously almost impossible to make it to Barrie. And then it's another 4 or 5 hours from Barrie to Ottawa. So I'm not sure. We'll see what we can do. We'll see if we can somehow squeeze something in. We'll see. We know that that's a possibility. We'll see what we can do. That's the best I can tell you. Anyways, that's a wrap. Yeah, there you go. D. Schultz. I don't really trust anyone at this point, but July 1st picnic. Right? That's it. But I'm pretty sure you can trust me, D. Gary Kemper. Yeah, love, peace. Exactly. All right. Anyways, that's a wrap for tonight. Yeah. I've been rambling quite a bit. Anyways, I love each and every one of you patriots, freedom fighters. The numbers are growing. We will get there. We will win. It's just the only thing that we don't know is how much pain we're going to have to endure before we do. But we will win. Mark my words. And remember, globalism bad, nationalism good. All right, guys. Ciao for now.
One day, I hope you see the truth. This puppet show stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil.
One more thing. Make sure you share this on Facebook, because I'm banned on Facebook. That's 6 platforms that I can't stream to, which of course, numbers were growing again because I was back on for a while, but now I've been banned again. So do me a favor, share the YouTube link on Facebook. Everybody that's here, whatever, go to your Facebook, share the link from YouTube, and we'll get it out that way. And that's it. Okay, bye.
Too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.